So good afternoon everyone, thanks again for joining me for my Facebook Live of the virtual walking tour. Today is Saturday the 13th of June and we're on day 3 and we are here at the Priory Primary School in Dudley. So thank you very much for all your wonderful comments over the last couple of days, and Adrian Keenan, thank you darling for your lovely message, that is really appreciated. So we're back on the Priory estate, and as I said, this is the Priory Primary School on Limes Road. So the Priory Primary School is very proud of its former pupil, and it has various displays around the school, including a library that's named after him, and the beginnings of a memorial garden that we're doing. The school budget unfortunately didn't allow it to go ahead when we wanted it to, but we are still collecting donations of plants and shrubs for the garden, and it will be a peace garden primarily dedicated to Duncan, but for the pupils who have lost their parents, siblings or their carers. Now this is the main entrance to the school, but this isn't the entrance that Duncan would have come to. That is round in Cedar Road, a little walk around the corner. So we're going to do that walk with you and tell you some facts about the Priory and about Duncan. So as you can see, there's some wonderful rainbows on the gate. I must give a shout out to the pupils that have come into the school during lockdown, and of course the teachers that have been looking after the children of our key and care workers and those children that are at risk at home. They've been coming in throughout the lockdown, so it's a wonderful, wonderful school, and the pupils are lovely there too. Now, the school was first opened on October the 1st, 1930, so the same day as Duncan was born, but just a different year. And it started off just as a nursery school in a corrugated roofed building before being relocated to Limes Road in 1932. The school expanded and became a junior school, and that was opened in 1938. It was officially opened by Lady Astor, which at that time must have been a bit of a coup for the school, because she was an American-born British politician and she was only the second female MP in the House of Commons at that time. So it was a big thing for the school to be opened by her. It was seen as a very modern school for its time, and it was something that the local authority was extremely proud of. The outside of the school is very deceptive because it is huge. It is corridors and corridors and corridors, and there's around 700 pupils in there. I'm sure if Jill Craig or Sam is watching, or Lana Duffin, they will correct me, but I think it is about 700 pupils. Now, as I said, the original part of the school and the entrance that Duncan would have used is round the corner there. So we're just doing that walk. Again, these roads here is the roads that Duncan would have walked as a child, so it doesn't hurt to see them. And it is at this school that Duncan's God-given talent was first noticed, and I have to say, nurtured as well. He quickly became a part of the school football team, and he was certainly head and shoulders taller than the other kids. Now I have here a photograph of Duncan in the school team, and this was taken in 1948. Duncan attended the school from 1941 to 48, so this would have been his last term at the school. And he's standing in front of Mr. Jones, that's Mr. Jones there, and the head teacher, Mr. Hadley. And I'm going to show you that wall in a moment when we get round into Cedar Road where this photograph was taken. Other school friends on the photograph are Mickey Jones, Malcolm John, Alan Hunt, Ronnie Wright and Derek Bradley. And as I say, this would have been taken in the last term of Duncan being at Priory School before he moved on to Wolverhampton Street School, and we'll be visiting Wolverhampton Street School, or what remains of the school, on Monday. Duncan very much enjoyed school life. He had lots of friends and was very popular with the pupils and the staff. He excelled at PE, of course, but he also loved drawing and he loved history. But of course, as we all know, Duncan really did only have one interest in life. But he was a young lad and he loved being outdoors with his friends. He loved the freedom of having the park right on his doorstep. And the park is something that we're going to visit tomorrow, so you will see the playground, if you like, of Duncan. But sometimes he did venture further afield. He went to Grange Park, which is about a mile or so away, and sometimes he would even go to Netherton Park, which was at that time a small town or village as it was then, that's attached to Dudley, about 2 or 3 miles away. And Netherton is famous for the Noah Hingleys works, and Noah Hingleys was the factory where 33 years earlier had made the mighty chain and anchor for the doomed steamship Titanic. So there's lots of history in the Black Country, especially here in Dudley, and it is something that I'm very, very proud of. We've got some fabulous characters, and as I say, the history of our town is fabulous. If you have got nothing to do when you're sitting at home, then just Google Dudley, Black Country, West Midlands, because the history is amazing. During the school holidays and at weekends, Duncan would go out early in the morning, as children did then. There was no real threat on the streets then. It must have been wonderful to be able to let your children just roam free without any real worries. But he would go out early with a pack of jam sandwiches, no doubt some custard creams because they were his absolute favourite, and a bottle of cold tea. And he wouldn't return home until dusk. And for hours and hours and hours he played his beloved football, not only for fun, but he was honing in on those skills that would one day see him rise to fame with. Fishing was another great love of Duncan's, but there was never, of course, a football far away from him. He loved going to Arley in Warwickshire to visit his aunts, uncles and cousins. And although all of the family came from the Black Country, let's just let this car get out of his drive. Thank you, sir. Oh, bless you, thank you. What a gentleman. Even though his family were from the Black Country, they'd all moved to Warwickshire to work down the mines, so his family became miners. And he missed them, of course, but he did 2 or 3 times a year go on a steam train to visit them. His cousins Keith Edwards and his late cousin John Edwards, great friends and great supporters of the foundation, remember Duncan's visits very well, and they speak with fondness of the times that they did spend together in Warwickshire. Fishing, of course, climbing trees as boys do, and of course playing football. Now the school also housed around 20 evacuees during the Second World War, and 2 of those evacuees lived with the Edwards family at 31 Elm Road, where we visited yesterday. So I'm working with the National Evacuee Association to try and trace those lads, or at least their families. I have a great interest and passion really for the National Evacuee Association, because my own father and his family were evacuated from London to Leicestershire, and I just have a real passion because they are a generation that was lost really. Torn away from their own homes to places that they didn't know. So I'm working really closely with them, not only of course to trace the 2 lads that lived with Duncan and his family, but the lads and girls that came to the Priory School. I wonder if they realised that the lad that they once lodged with went on to be the greatest footballer that this world had ever seen. So we are now on Cedar Road and we are heading towards the entrance. But while we go up to the entrance that Duncan would have gone through. The trees that you can see in front of us is the beginning of the Wren's Nest estate and the famous Wren's Nest Nature Reserve. And I should tell you a little bit more about Wren's Nest, because that is another place that we hold in great esteem here in Dudley, and we're really proud of. But I'll tell you a little bit more about that tomorrow. I would just like to clarify a point that I made yesterday about who signed Duncan for Manchester United. Like I said, there's always a lot of discussion on who visited the Edwards home in the early hours of Duncan's 16th birthday to get that precious signature on the contract that would make him the newest signing for the Busby Babes. Well, I did a lot of things last night when I got home, but one of them was to go through the archives, and I did read an extract from Duncan's own book called Tackle Football This Way. He had written it and it was published posthumously, and he stated that it was indeed, like I always thought, Matt Busby that had signed him in the early hours of his 16th birthday. In June of the same year, 1952, he had signed for the youth team, and it was indeed Jimmy Murphy and Bert Whalley that had signed him. Again, that was in the early hours of the morning, and that was because Bert Whalley had travelled down, or had attempted to travel down to Dudley, but his car had broken down and he had to turn back to Old Trafford. And when he got there, Jimmy Murphy was waiting with a rental car and said, "We're not going to let this boy get away." So they came back down. It wasn't a motorway then, of course, it must have taken a while. And they signed Duncan for the youth team in 1952. But by Duncan's own admission, and you can't argue with that, I don't care what anybody says, it was the boss himself, Matt Busby, that signed him. As we all know, Duncan only wanted to play for one team. He only wanted to play for Manchester United, so there was no need really for Matt to make that early morning visit to the home of the Edwards. But of course, Matt really wanted him. But there was lots of teams that wanted Duncan. Our local team to this area, Wolverhampton Wanderers, was really keen to sign Duncan. The then manager, Stan Cullis, would often visit the Edwards home on Elm Road and would go to all of the games that Duncan played in. But of course, as I say, Duncan only wanted to play for Manchester United. He went on, of course, to become great friends with some of the Wolverhampton Wanderers team, and none more so than the great Billy Wright. And even though Billy was somewhat older than Duncan, he certainly held Duncan in great esteem and always believed that Duncan would be the one that replaced him as England captain. But although the youth team had been signed and sealed, there was no guarantee that Duncan would carry on playing for them. So as I said, Matt Busby got that signature and travelled to Dudley himself to make sure that they did indeed get their boy. Now, the idea of a great team, up and coming, bright and enthusiastic, nurtured to have the right mindset on and off the pitch, was not a new concept, however. In the early 40s, Major Frank Buckley of Wolverhampton Wanderers had the Buckley Babes, and indeed Billy Wright was one of those young lads, a young Shropshire boy from the beautiful Ironbridge, about 20 miles from here. And it is by coincidence that Major Buckley was from Urmston, where our great friend Johnny Spangles, or Johnny Hindley as you may know him, lives and is doing such fabulous work in his community. So I must give a shout out to Johnny, because he's a great friend of ours and I've got a lot of love and affection for Johnny, bless him. So we've arrived at the gate where Duncan would have come to. The school has evolved and lots of new wings have been added to it, but this is the gate that Duncan would have attended school through. There was a teacher here called Jeff Groves who wrote a letter to his friend that said, "I've just seen an 11-year-old boy who will one day play for England." And my goodness, how right he was. But he couldn't have known the meteoric rise to fame Duncan would have had, and of course how tragic the ending would have been. So that wall there, just beyond the sign that says main entrance to school, is the wall where that photograph was taken. And there's Duncan. I always remember his mum saying, "Oh my goodness, doesn't he look a scruffy sod on that photo?" But he was, as you can see, head and shoulders the most of the other boys in that picture. And there's Mr. Hadley, the head teacher there. But there he is in that school. So if you do visit the school, come to Cedar Road entrance, just literally around the block from Limes Road. And that is the wall there. That famous photograph now of Duncan was taken. So tomorrow we're going to be visiting Priory Park, just a stone's throw from here. And it was Duncan's playground, and it was where the foundation stone of Duncan's great, albeit all too short career, was perfected. But I'll just leave you now with that last look of that wall where that young lad stood all those years ago with great ideas and great ambition that he did fulfil. Thanks for all of your wonderful comments from yesterday and the last couple of days. I really appreciate them. This is, as you can probably have gathered, is a great passion of mine. I made a promise to his mum that I was going to keep Duncan's name alive, and that's what we're trying to do. So doing this is no great task for me. I love it, and I love the lad that was Duncan Edwards. And from a lot of your comments and a lot of the fans' comments, it's obvious that you guys did too. So as always, enjoy the sunshine. It's a little bit cloudy, but the sunshine is glorious. So keep safe, keep looking after each other, and keep well, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for joining me. Bye-bye.